Welcome to the Balanced Ambition podcast. I'm your host, Matt Southam. Here, we delve into candid conversations with entrepreneurs, exploring both their business journey and their secrets to maintaining mental well-being. As we navigate the balance of ambition and inner peace, I hope you find insights, inspiration, and invaluable takeaways in every episode. Thank you for joining us. Ahmed, welcome to the show today. I want to start off by just asking you to provide some context to your life. Tell me a bit about you. Tell me about your background.
I'm in the education sector, and I guess one of the questions I typically get asked is something along the lines of, at what point did you decide or know that you were going to go and set up a business in that area? There's a really famous speech by Steve Jobs, and he talks about how you connect dots backwards, and you understand events in your life that allow you to get to the point that you're at now. So my parents came as immigrants. They came over from Iraq, just about making ends meet. They had 4 kids and did the best that they could, and they were amazing for us. The education system here is very much that you could very easily fall into a very, very bad school. And I ended up in a very, very bad school. To give you some context, the A star to C rate out of GCSEs was about 21%, which is one of the lowest in the country.
Yeah.
I loved it, don't get me wrong. But the benefit of that is that in hindsight, I look back and understand that the experiences that I had shaped who I've become up to this point. So I was very lucky because I have an older brother who's very academic, very studious, very a great role model. So I was always very studious. I was always someone that wanted to do well academically, partly to be him. I'm very competitive. I hate it.
Yeah.
So it was the aspect of I need to get better grades than he did. And one of the most kind of fundamental moments that I remember is in year 10. So just before we started GCSEs, we were in a media studies class, my friends and I, and the teacher was telling us about how we want to aim for like A's and B's. Let's get A's and B's. Being the nerd that I was, I put my hand up and he was like, "Sir, what about getting an A star?" And I will never forget this moment because he set the class a task and then he went and whispered into my ear, "Let's be realistic." And that was a really significant moment because it was like, okay, cool. It's not a question of me proving you wrong. I'm going to prove you wrong by dragging other people in this class to getting an A star. So that lunch, approached some of my mates and was like, "Look, whether you like it or not, I'm going to start teaching you media studies." They're like, "What?" I went to the librarian at school and I was like, "Can I use this?" No one really uses the library. And it started off with 2 or 3 friends. And it was just me basically teaching them media studies completely free. A week or 2 into this, they turn around and were like, "Can you do maths? Matt, this is really helpful. I'm really understanding this." So I started doing maths and it became after school as well as lunchtime. People started to basically hear about this within kind of our cohort and year. And it really shows you how actually kids do want to do well. And if they're given the right platform, they can do well, because it started to expand to the point where we had about 15, 20 people turning up, some of whom I genuinely didn't know. They were just in my year. And it was chemistry, biology, physics, everything. And actually, again, it was, free tuition, if you like, but it was the first kind of building block towards what it ended up being. I went from that, and then I went to a 6th form, so just before university, which was one of the most academic in the whole country. And I remember sitting there, and actually it was our first internal assessment, a maths exam. And there was a kid next to me who'd been at the school since year 7. And he was fully weeping, like he was actually crying because he just got his results for a maths exam. I got 68% or something, which, I was, all right, not too bad. It's the first exam. He was crying because he got 98%. He dropped a mark. And I was like, what? I thought 100% was this myth that my parents perpetuated. Oh, you didn't get 100%. And back in my day, I used to get 100%. And it was this realization that actually the academic system, you can achieve incredible results, and you can if you know what you're doing. Often it's the case that kids just don't actually know where to go and how to actually navigate their way through it. And it's this massive, almost inequality gap. Again, even then I didn't realize that this was going to be my calling card or this is what I would do. I went to the London School of Economics for university. So LSE, to give you some background, is a very, very corporate university. I don't know if you know anyone from LSE. Just to give you an anecdote. So I think it was the first week, it was Freshers Week. Everyone's getting to know one another and whatnot. This guy came up to me after maybe 1 minute of convo, dropped, "Have you applied to Spring Week at Goldman Sachs yet?" What is Goldman Sachs? Don't even know what Sachs is. You get sucked into this concept and idea that unless you work in investment banking, or unless you work in consultancy, and nothing wrong with working in those industries, you failed. Why are you at LSE if you're basically not doing that? So for a while, actually, I was in that world. I interned at multiple places. I interned at Barclays. I remember that internship very vividly because I would speak to other interns that were, within that kind of program, and we'd have these conversations about, are you enjoying what you're doing? And obviously, I wasn't silly enough to think that at that time that, what I'm doing as an intern is a reflection of what I would do if I was working full time as in the graduate scheme. What I did instead is I said, okay, let me compare what my manager is doing. And I asked myself two questions. I was like, okay, imagine I could get to her station in half the time. So I work really, really hard, achieve all the objectives they set me, and I get to that point. One is this exciting enough and challenging enough? And two, does it pay enough? And on both metrics, the answer was no. It was, this doesn't in any way feel like something that I would want to wake up on a Monday morning to do. So I remember they offered me the graduate scheme role at the end of the internship. I didn't actually consult anyone, much to my mum's mortification afterwards. I didn't consult any friends. I didn't consult any family. I just knew in my gut this was not for me. So I just declined politely and said, thank you very much. That's really nice of you. But even at that point, I still didn't understand or realize that actually what I needed to do was set up my own thing. I went and interned I did oil trading for a while. And again, it sounds so glamorous. When you sit there, like basically in front of a computer screen for like 12 hours. It's not that great. I interned at Moody's. Again, it was really interesting. So I was in the sovereign team and really applying the economic concepts that I'd learned at university. But something was missing. And it was this idea of, okay, what is it about what I'm doing at the moment that I'm just not kind of feeling that motivated? I always talk about it as my inner child. I'm very, very immature, honestly. And I become immature. I'm seen as like a class clown in my daughter's school. So I'm that parent that they basically think if the entertainer fails, this guy will step in. Anyways, so I remember it was about 2 months into a 6-month internship at Moody's, and I was going up the lift to Canary Wharf. And I remember so vividly that I could not recall whether it was Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. I had no idea. The only 2 days in the week that you typically would know is Monday, because you're really depressed, and Friday, because you're looking forward to the weekend, which then goes really fast and then back to Monday again. But I was like, this can't be life. Like, I cannot have worked this hard and I did all these things in terms of academics and everything else to basically be in a situation where everything is like blurred. And I'm just, it's almost like automotion. And it was literally at that moment in time where I started to genuinely pursue the idea of becoming an entrepreneur or to set up a business. It wasn't something in any way that was planned or that I had in advance thought I would do. But that was the moment. It was the realization that, okay, I have to do something or try something at least that takes me out of quote unquote the rat race. But I didn't know what that would be at the time. I figured it out within 2 weeks or so, but I didn't know just then.
I mean, that's quite the story. And actually, as we move on to what you do now, within education, this that you said about joining the dots, this does go right back to year 10. Yeah. That some of those early influences. So one thing that really, resounded with me was the fact of expectations for people. And I often think, that the bar, we reach the bar that's set for us maybe by someone else rather than actually what it could be.
Yeah. I honestly, that is the central motto on which the entire company has been built on. It's a really cheesy saying, but I genuinely live by this, which is that it is better to aim high and miss than to aim low and hit. And I instill this concept and constantly talk to the tutors about this. The idea that your role as an educator, in my opinion, extends far more than just teaching content. It's great, of course, you teach content. Your role is to completely and utterly shift the way that someone looks at themselves and how they basically, it's to do with self-confidence. That's actually the beauty, I think, of education, is that it equips you with the skills to be able to go and do things that you thought you couldn't do and to not limit yourself. Now, there are some people, for example, who are very happy working in those roles that I didn't like. That's totally fine. It's a personality thing. But ultimately, in the end, to be confined into this box, I think is one of the worst things that can happen. And sometimes parents do this without realizing it as well, by the way. We can be very guilty of this without realizing that, if you constantly tell your child that this is kind of their expectation level and this is what they can achieve, that becomes a reality. If you keep telling someone, they will behave in that manner. So much of what we do and so much of what I do is to try and basically just smash that concept to pieces and to realign those expectations without placing a cap, basically.
Yeah, our self-beliefs are incredibly powerful. And yeah, I have seen that with regard to, what we tell our children, or even just, peers. And there's the saying about you're the sum of the five people you hang around with. And it is just, do we get stuck into that? Whether it's, the expectations based on where you grew up, your family, the school that you went to, the first job, whatever it is, we often get caught in, I can't do that.
Yeah, for sure. There is definitely unfair advantages, and there is a lottery, 100%. Like being born into a family that, I think, for example, a lot of the kids that I teach myself personally, they go to some of the best schools in the country, and although the academic kind of profiling and the academics is very strong, and they typically do very well, I actually think the biggest advantage they have, the unfair advantage they're born with, is the fact that their parents typically are entrepreneurs, or their parents are highly successful in their industry. And what they learn from their parents, those are the things that, even as I'm 34, turning 35 this year, honestly, I sit there and they're telling me about all these like investment vehicles or whatever. I'm like, I don't know any of this. I need to learn from you. So, and actually, the more broad point here is that education never stops. People learn, and I'm still learning now. I'm sure you're still learning, and
yeah,
that was one of the motivations behind setting up a company within education. It was when I kind of got down to the nitty-gritty side of things and went, okay, what is it that I want to do, or what business do I want to set up? There were two things that I was looking for. Number one, most importantly, is that it's something I have to be really passionate about. It doesn't necessarily need to be the most lucrative. I actually think that you can make most things lucrative if you really know what you're doing. But two is that it needed to be something that would have fairly consistent demand, where the market you couldn't really have an external shock that suddenly means that market just disappears. Education pretty much satisfies that condition, I think, more than any industry. I can't think of anything that you could date back to the first civilization. You're learning all the time. So it was almost like a no-brainer. And what helped is the fact that I had been tutoring, informally from when I was 15, but all the way through university as well. I continued to basically fund some of my education with private tuition. So I kind of knew the market already anyway. So it was almost like a no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, the education system is a funny system as such, however, the way it's structured here in the UK. But equally, you said about, people's backgrounds and things, sort of unfair advantage. I remember I had a conversation with someone, and one thing that was noticed, certainly with young children, and mine are still very young, and I read with them in the evening because I'm around. I work during the day, and that's fine. But there's other children born into families who parents have got second jobs or are out working in the evening, and they don't get that opportunity. And sometimes things like that, it is an unfair advantage from an early age, and how we overcome some of that, because the daily education system, certainly with UK sort of state school, they're large classes, and perhaps it's not individualized, but actually we all need at times that individual motivation. Because what motivates you might not motivate me, and vice versa, and so on. But it's tapping into what it actually is that enables someone to, progress really well in life and follow that dream as such. Sounds a bit cheesy, but that's what it is.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. Talking about reading to your children. There's actually a study that shows that there's a correlation between the number of books in a household and academic attainment, and it makes sense. It makes sense because it might indicate to some extent, I guess, whether the parents themselves are putting in the time with their child to basically do this. But you're right. Sometimes people just don't have the time. They're struggling to make ends meet. They are. It's very difficult. There's a cost of living crisis right now. Energy bills are through the roof, and everything else. So there are major unfair advantages, and there are major inequalities in the education sector. It's I think one of the motivations behind this is to try and help as many people as possible to hopefully kind of realign their expectations, if you like.
Yeah. So tell me a bit about you outside of work. What is it that sort of keeps you going? Because I'm very aware when you run your own business, you probably stepped out of the rat race thinking I'm going to work for myself and this is all going to be rosy. But actually there are bumps along the road, and it's very easy to get really consumed by work. So what do you do outside of work?
Yeah, I mean, there's two parts to this. So the first part is the fact that I think it's very easy when you set up a business, and I think actually until very recently, to go from it's not necessarily owning a business, it's you own a job to a large extent, right? And a lot of people basically try to or struggle to make that shift towards actually owning a business. I definitely struggled, and I still think even now I probably work too much, and I need to balance my life a lot better. So for me, there's a few things. So family time, I love spending as much time as I possibly can with my daughter. She's 5 years old. She's loads of fun. My wife, and so for me, my schedule is very hectic because of the fact that alongside running the company, I still tutor. I love doing it, and it actually gives me the freedom to be a bit more relaxed about the company because my main source of income, or the thing that I basically derive most of my income from, still remains my private tuition. Meaning that everything the company generates, I can just reinvest, and it's almost like a bit more fun. Which then gives me the opportunities to do stuff like this, but also to take time in the middle of the day to, I don't know, if there's an event at her school, I'll definitely make sure I go there. I can do as many pickups as I possibly can and spend as much time. Saturdays I'm taking around different classes. It's Dad and Ada Day, right? So I've got better at it, and I think there are several things that I've done that allow me to get a better work-life balance than I definitely had before. When she was born was actually quite an important moment because prior to that point, I was working 7 days a week. I was like, okay, this is crazy. There's no point in working all of these hours if you're not going to spend time with your loved ones. So I made sure Saturdays were always free. I've now also done Fridays free. But the other thing is that there are 4 or 5 things that I've done, I think, fairly well in the last year or two. One of them is to try and take my health a lot more seriously than I was. So I've started to go to the gym more often. One of the things I did a year ago, which I recommend to anyone, as long as they've got financial means to do so, is get a PT. Honestly, the reason why isn't because necessarily he's showing me all these exercises that I don't know. It definitely does help, to have someone who knows what they're doing. It's genuinely accountability. And sometimes when you're a business owner or you're working crazy hours or you're kind of sucked into that world of just constantly working, there are days where honestly I'd rather do anything than go to the gym, but because I have a session booked in with him, I feel like I'm letting him down, so I will force myself to go. So that's the first thing I've done that's, I think, pretty good. 2, I think the most important thing that I've learned in the last 5-6 years is the importance of saying no, is to not think of everything as opportunity cost, and not to think of everything as, oh, if I give this up or I don't do this, what if, right? What if this would have happened? What if this? And it's to pick and choose the things that I want to do, but also that actually I can see will yield something long term. And that doesn't necessarily have to mean monetary. It just might mean that it will make me feel better about myself. So I've done that. I've got a PA who deals with a lot of my admin stuff, which really helps. Managed to automate large aspects of the company as well. So wherever possible, it sounds like I'm trying to be as lazy as possible, but actually that I think is a good thing. Because it just means that I have more time to I tried to educate myself over the last year about finance and investment, which sounds really funny considering I studied economics at LSE. You genuinely don't get taught these things. You get taught all these theoretical models and concepts, but until a couple of years ago, I didn't know what an ISA was, which is mental. In hindsight, I'm like, why did no one tell me this? Why did no one tell me about the process of applying for a mortgage and stamp duty and all these really adult terms that no one teaches you? The education system is not designed, unfortunately, to basically equip you with the skills to grow money and invest properly. So yeah, that's basically what I do. I mean, the thing that I'm really passionate about is football. I'm a massive football fan. It's a very bad time for me to be a football fan because I'm a Man United fan. So dark times right now. But hopefully, it will change soon. But yeah, so that's basically how I try to balance as much as I can.
Yeah, there's a couple of bits in there. I mean, I often joke that the reason I can be productive and I find really good processes and ways to do things is because I'm lazy. It's not because I'm productive. When I'm okay, is there a better way we can do this? And I don't mean cutting corners. I just mean optimizing a process, and that is born out of the fact that it can be a bit lazy, but in a good way. And I use that as fuel. And secondly, accountability is really key. I think that's probably one thing that sets entrepreneurs, apart from other people is the discipline to continue something through, because we all have those bursts of motivation. You know, we're talking about the gym, you know, we would have seen it in January. Everyone has that burst of motivation, right? I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week and things like that. Suddenly, when life gets a bit busy, actually, it's not motivation that's going to keep you going, because that thing goes. It's that discipline. And often we need an external factor, whether that's, a PT or just someone holding you accountable, because as business owners, often we're the last stop, you know, like who's going to tell us what to do during our day?
Yeah. You know what I think is really interesting is the bit where you spoke about laziness leading to a kind of a good outcome, right? Or what I see is like what people might perceive as negative traits, and how negative or stereotypically negative traits may not necessarily be bad in certain circumstances. Example, I talked about being a child. I'm unbelievably immature. Honestly, like one of the most horrifying realizations was when I was interning and working in investment banking and kind of finance. At school and everything up to that point at university as well, no matter how tough it would get, you'd always have the summer holiday break to look forward to. It was almost like that light at the end of the tunnel. You're like, I'm going to get at least 6 weeks. Sometimes 2 months to just really chill out, hang out with my friends, enjoy life, whatever. And then you get to the working world and you're like, wait, there's no summer holiday. What do you mean? Like, are you joking? Like, as in, you're 28 days off in 28 days, or 28 days. And that was one of those things where it was like, no, I can't let go of this. So therefore, one of the reasons, again, with education is the fact that I've been approached many times to go, would you like to, you know, involve yourself in another business? Or have you thought about setting up and actually at one point I thought about setting up a company like an edtech. And I realized actually through that journey, or that very brief journey, that I value so much more having those 2 months to just do nothing. To just, if I want to work, I can work. But if I want to spend the whole time with my daughter, if I want to spend the whole time with my wife, take them to holidays. And that's really important, because again, it goes back to this idea of saying no, because I want to be a child. I want to basically enjoy the fact that I have those 2 months, because I know I work really hard for 10 months. So those 2 months are like sacred, and they are so important.
Yeah, there is that real benefit. The summer holidays, you know, I think you maybe miss it when you come out of education and then just work. But when you have kids again, suddenly actually term time and summer holidays starts to become a bit more of your routine. And I say slow down a little bit during those summer months, you know, because there's less going on. Lots of people are off on holiday and I work, but actually there is a slight mindset shift. And bizarrely, I don't do my most productive work after around 3 o'clock. Good. I definitely sort of switch off a little bit. And I don't know whether this is just conditioned from that school day for, 10 years or more than that, between the ages of 5 and 16, that, 3:15, the bell was going, you're done for the day. Yeah. I definitely have a little bit of energy loss after 3 o'clock, and it's not when I'm most productive, and I know that, and I structure my day around the tasks that I do that don't necessarily need the creative side for me at the end of the day. I get all that work out early in the day. Yeah. It is funny how maybe we have been conditioned by some of those things without even realizing it. You say joining the dots backwards.
Yeah, it makes complete sense to me. I completely get this. Yeah, but it's just, I think it's so important to understand that as you make more, there's almost like an instinct to want more, but actually to just sit back and be content and be so grateful for what you do have, and it goes back to, so I mean, one of the conversations that I have with a lot of people, especially those who are starting up the entrepreneurial journey, is the importance of money, and I think it's one of those misunderstood concepts, because I think there's a stigma around money. Or potentially that people who you see trying to pursue money, they're portrayed in a very negative light, like movies and things like that. But I think it's a really important convo to have, because for me, money serves 2 key purposes. Other than basic necessities and like making sure that you've got accommodation, you've got food for your family, whatnot. That goes without saying. I think money, the reason why money is important is because, number one, is it should buy you the most valuable currency in the world, which is time. And I think that until very recently, I was the biggest hypocrite in the world, because I kept constantly telling people about this, and then realized, wait, I keep talking about this, but actually myself, I'm not doing this. So I've made a conscious effort to go on, even if it's just a little walk, for an hour during the day, whether it's to go and have a nice meal with my wife when my daughter's at school, or to meet up with some of my former students. I had such a lovely meeting with one of my students a couple of weeks ago actually, and we just went and walked through Regent's Park for about 2 hours. And so that's the first thing, is that money should enable you, if you have enough of it, to be able to buy time, and that's so invaluable. The second is, I think that money is the vehicle with which, if you want to affect change and do good, you can do it on a macro level rather than a micro level. I bang on about this concept because, as an example, so even though he played for the enemy, but Sadio Mane, he used to play for Liverpool Football Club, Bayern Munich, highly successful football player, right?
Yeah.
Sadio Mane is one of my biggest inspirations in life. He is absolutely incredible. So he obviously worked really hard to get to that point and be an elite football player. But what he did with his money, and I'm not saying everyone has to do this with their money, but what he did is, I remember reading that he invested £500,000 to build a hospital in his local village. He supplies electricity, I think 24 hours a day, to the people in that village. He built a school. He's provided laptops to students. If you think about it, one man being able to do that, it is impossible for him to have achieved that without money. So you might be able to dedicate your time to noble causes, and that's amazing, and do that. But actually, I think that if you want to affect change on a very profound macro level, you need money. So pursuing money, obviously through legal means and ethical means and all of that, is in itself not, I think, a terrible thing. I think actually that if you have that understanding of those are the two things that money should be for, beyond the basics, then actually it makes everything slightly more exciting. And it's this realization that actually there's something more important about why I'm trying to do what I'm doing, beyond, I don't know, the accolades and having a nice car or something like.
Yeah.
About that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, money should be an enabler. And I often have this discussion with people setting sort of financial goals in their business. It's like, okay, that's fine, but why? Yeah. Why is that figure important? Yeah. You know, because if it's just to say we're turning over X amount or whatever, then what often happens is you get to that goal and then you just put a higher goal. Yeah. But for what purpose? Yeah. You know, and I don't mean that, you shouldn't be earning that money. It's exactly like you were saying, what is it that you want out of having that money? Is it something that you can do? Is it so that you can, even if it's down to I want to grow a team and employ more people, because actually employment is a good thing. You know, the more people who are working, it provides for them and their family and so on and so on. So that's fine to have that goal. But yeah, there's got to be some reason behind the money. Yeah, money's an enabler to enable you to do something. And you're exactly right. The most important currency is time, because we can always get more money. And I know that's a very simplistic statement I've just made there. So, no, I agree. But yeah, you can always make more money. What you can't make is more time.
Exactly. I totally agree. I genuinely think that it's such an important thing to discuss and such an important thing for people to realize, because and again, I'm talking from a position of major hypocrisy, but I'm trying. There's a conscious awareness of the fact that I will only be on this planet for X amount of time, so do as much good as I can in that time, but actually to also really value the time that I have, because of the fact that I work in the evenings in terms of my tuition. My daytimes, I could easily sit there and work endlessly to try and grow the business, and it's already growing, and I do spend time on growing the business. But ultimately, it goes back to your question of why. What is the purpose? What are you trying to achieve by doing it? And it's like, okay, so if I earned an extra £100,000, let's say, what is that going to do to my life? As in, what is that actually going to shape or change? It might allow me to basically do more of that good stuff. That's fine. But at the same time, if it's the compromise of my health, and if it's the compromise of basically just spending hours upon hours working relentlessly, that can't be life. Like life can't just be a constant grind. Like there's so much more to it than that. So yeah, I totally agree with you. Time is everything.
Yeah. And perhaps we do have a strange relationship with money based on our upbringing, based on the school system, and things like that. Because there's the book, isn't there, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and just people's shaping around that perception of money, and perhaps that's something as a society, needs to shift. How I'm certainly not the one to speak about it, but how we do that, I don't know. But do you feel that actually, I suppose that goes right back to people's preconceived sort of perceptions of how they're going to do. Actually, money links in with that, because it's often how we measure some success with regard to, you know, the jobs that they're doing.
I think a lot of it is psychological. And I think that maybe my perception of what money is not the same as what it would be for other people. And that's completely fine. I think this is why education is so important, though, because if you have a strong education, what strong education means to me is two things. One is, so I used to see my degree as a means to an end. So when I applied to LSE and applied to the specific course that I applied for, so I did politics and economics, it was in my mind to work in an industry that is really competitive, very high paying, investment banking, basically. That's essentially, I don't know very much about it, but it was like, okay, cool, this is competitive, this is gonna be fun, let's do it, right? In hindsight now, I actually look at my degree not as the means to the end, it is my backup plan. In the sense that if everything failed, if the company collapsed, everyone decided this person's the worst human in the world, I don't see it as a race, in the sense that I couldn't care less if my friends are earning significantly more money than I am. That's completely fine. I can then just go back, do a master's, I have my degree, I go do a master's or whatever, even with my degree, I could probably go and then work back in that world. Yes, I may not enjoy it, but I've got the ability to basically suck it up and do it, right? So I think that education enables you to basically be a bit more picky about what you do. And it should give you the confidence to be able to understand that you can position yourself to make a success of almost anything that you do. And that if it doesn't work out, you still have those skills that they haven't gone anywhere. And now you can go and take up a job. If I have to work 3 jobs to pay bills, I will do it. That's not ideally what I want to do, but I will do it, even if it's just on a temporary basis. I actually remember when I was growing up, I was about 19 years old, and one of my very, very good friends, he's a very misunderstood character. He's actually now gone on to set up 2 very successful companies in London. He's one of those people that from the outset you look at him and go, what's wrong with this guy? But I love him. He's amazing. He came up to me once when I was like really stressed ahead of a second year exam. And at the time when he said this, I was like, what the hell's wrong with you? And in hindsight, it was probably one of the best bits of advice I've ever been given. I don't even think he intended it as advice. He sat me down and was like, listen, we're both going to be successful. It's just the question of how successful we'll be. And in hindsight, I was like, how arrogant are you? Oh my God, how can you basically have that that confidence, right? And it was because he understood that because we had worked so hard up to that point and that we'd got to where we went to university and school and all of that, that success, quote unquote success, is essentially those who are willing to put in hours, those who are willing to take on risk, and those who are willing to basically think a little bit outside the box. It's I might not be a multimillionaire or a billionaire, but that doesn't mean it's not successful, right? Am I able to pay my bills? Am I able to do, go on holidays or whatever? If the answer to those things are yes, in a way, that is success, right? That takes away a lot of the stress involved with money, because the way I see money is it's just a piece of paper. It's a piece of paper, and therefore I know if I needed to, I could make more, whatever that might be. It may not be substantially more, but if I needed to go work, even if it's checkouts at the tills, even though self-checkout machines would come and taking that job. I used to work at Tesco when I was at university, right? I don't mind. I would do that. That's absolutely fine. And then if you think of it that way, it suddenly becomes a little bit less scary. It becomes less intimidating, I think. And then you're more likely to go and pursue projects that you genuinely want to pursue. Or you might force yourself to do the extra hours initially as a means of then escaping whatever it is that you're doing and doing something that you want to do. Side hustles. I always talk to people about side hustles. I'm like, listen, you hate what you're doing. I'm not telling you to quit because you've got bills to pay. You've got responsibilities. Don't quit just yet. But what are you doing in your evening? What are you doing on the weekend? I know that's probably the time you need to recuperate, and that's really important. But if you're that depressed doing what it is that you're currently doing, why don't you try something on the side? Why don't you try something that can be automated? Why don't you try something like, I don't know, start a vlog, start writing a blog, do something. So yeah, I think people's perceptions of money it shapes enormously how they behave around money and also how they lead their life generally, I think.
Yeah, no, there's some great insights there. And I guess the big question there is what do you see as being successful? How would you define success?
I would summarize it in one word, and I think it's just content, being content. I think that it's very easy to always constantly compare yourself by looking up. But if you compare by looking down, it's so much gratitude for what you have and understanding that you're so lucky for what you have. There are so many people that are in far worse positions than you are. And actually, that's not to say that you plateau and just become stale. No, you're always aiming to basically improve. But I think ultimately being content means that it takes away a lot of the burden in terms of that journey, right? So again, it goes back to, if I am content and I understand that even if it requires me to work a lot harder or do 2-3 jobs to earn more money, I'm not afraid of losing money. I'm not afraid of saying no to potential opportunities. I'm not afraid to take on more risk than the average person. And it's just, at that point, it's almost like a game. And it's like, okay, cool, this is just a bit of fun. I know that may sound almost offensive to some people who, are just about making ends meet and struggling to pay their bills. And I proper get that that's not what I'm trying to say. But it's more the realization that we all have the ability, I think, to make money. I think we all have the ability to get out of the situation that we are in. Yes, it may require time, effort, and a lot of pain initially. But if the long-term ambition is to basically do something that you genuinely like doing and that motivates you to get out of bed, it doesn't matter whether you're earning less than your mates, and it doesn't matter whether you're earning less than what you're earning at the moment, as long as in the end you can turn around and say, yeah, I'm content. I'm actually content. That for me is ultimate success.
That's, brilliant summary there. I mean, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a fantastic conversation, and I've learned lots as well. And I treat every day as a new opportunity to be able to learn, and I try and be a sponge as well, and take on as much as I can, because I'm a big believer in education, or self-education as well. It doesn't matter how old you are, you can always learn something. So thank you very much for joining me, and I wish you all the best in future endeavors.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Balanced Ambition podcast. I genuinely hope the stories inspire you as much as they inspire me. If you found value in today's conversation, please share it with a friend. And remember, by subscribing, you won't miss an episode, and it would truly mean the world to me. Stay balanced, and I'll see you next time.